Hi, and welcome to this channel. I'm Claire, and I love talking about arms and armour, women's histories, and the surprising, unexpected ways these two subjects often intersect. Sometimes I talk about LGBTQI representation, sometimes I talk about awesome swords, and sometimes I talk about axes. Today, let's talk about one axe in particular. A very seemingly cute looking axe, but that's maybe because we're looking at it through rose-tinted glasses. So let's delve deeper into this axe, which is pink and apparently is heart-themed. Let's get into it. So this object, this axe, is most commonly captioned as such: mountaineering axe with heart-shaped holes, which is interesting. It's also pink! And this sword is from Japan, dating from the Muromachi period, from the 14th century. So a little more digging, because this axe is shared a lot across the internet with that caption, but often there is no indication of provenance. Write down the provenance, make curators and historians very happy. A little bit more digging shows it comes from the collections of the Nara National Museum in Japan. Let's put it out there. This axe is everywhere. People are obsessed with this axe, and it's kind of easy to see why. It kind of subverts our expectations around what an axe is supposed to look like and how it's supposed to be designed. Most people, from what I've seen on the internet, interacting with this axe find it compelling because of that kind of weird, unexpected contrast between this weapon that seems designed for killing, for battle, and its association in terms of design with elements that are most commonly associated with femininity, like colour pink and hearts. Many people have looked at this weapon and commented on the fact that it would be great for a warrior woman to wield, which is fascinating in itself and interesting to kind of reverse engineer. Why can't we imagine a pink, supposedly heart-themed axe in the hands of a man? I think what's interesting with this type of object and the way in which it is commented on and circulated on the internet is that regardless of the truth and the context behind it, which we're going to explore a bit more in detail, it provides points of entry and engagement in terms of arms and armour and unexpected associations with femininity and women in that specific context. A big part of what interests me is how we can resist those assumptions around who fought and who didn't, and how we can look at the presence of warrior women as not only something that is confirmed by historical records, but that continues into the media that we consume today. But let's dig a little bit deeper into what the actual context behind this axe is in the first place. So the initial context for this axe appears in terms of the place in which it was originally kept before it arrived at the Nara National Museum. It came from the Jinsho-ji Temple in the Shiga Prefecture in Japan. And while the caption it had circulating with it talks about it as a mountaineering axe with heart-shaped holes, let's see what the original caption at the Nara Museum actually is. Ritual axe for mountaineering priests practicing Shugendo. Shugendo is a religion originating in Heian-era Japan in the 7th century, composed of specific practices that draw from a range of different philosophies and beliefs such as Buddhism, Shintoism, and different folk practices. And the practices surrounding Shugendo, from what I've been able to research, are very specifically linked to the mountain and enacting rituals within a mountain setting. Practitioners of Shugendo believe they will acquire specific supernatural powers and also attain salvation for themselves and for others by enacting specific ritual rites within this mountain setting. And this involves a lot of traveling through the mountain and through like kind of really wild mountainous landscapes with all the dangers and obstacles that this would present. And the practices in the mountains themselves are referred to as Nyubi Shigid. Hopefully I got this right. Where does the axe come into all of this? Well, the museum label also refers to it as a Nyubu axe. So it would have been specifically used in the context of worshippers using it to cut down branches and any other natural elements that would have been in their path during this mountain traveling. Over time, this use of the mountaineering axe and its help on a practical level in terms of enacting these rites would have also made it into a ritual object as well. But let's talk about the heart shapes, or what we think are heart shapes, because let's face it, there's a bit of projection going on, right? We're surrounded by the little emoji everywhere. I mean, I send dozens of hearts every day, I've just realized, and it's become such a huge part of the culture surrounding us. So when we see it, or when we see its shape reproduced on an item like this, we might immediately just navigate towards that, right? It must be a heart. And we might have the same temptation when we look at this temple window in the Shojuin temple in Japan. Well, sorry to break it to you, but this is not a heart design. It is just as interesting and compelling, however. So what is this shape if it's not a heart? Well, in Japanese visual culture, this symbol is actually the inome, which is literally the boar's eye. See? Not a heart, but not boring at all. So why? Why would you put stylized boar's eye on your axe? Well, this meaning may have varied a lot according to context. An initial meaning may have been to emulate and perhaps channel the spirit of the boar itself, to channel the traits that are typically associated with the zodiac sign of the boar. So that is honesty, straightforwardness, and determination, which are kind of inspired by the boar's straightforward way of just charging straight at you without any hesitation, any turning back, just kind of straight on aggression. You know, it's inspirational really. Just charge through life like a boar charging its prey or whoever's hurting its babies. And you can see how this idea of aggression and the values distilled from it would actually be a good match for weaponry. But Claire, I hear you clamour. This mountaineering axe with the inome design wasn't actually a fighting axe. Well, my friend, my enemy, my arch rival. It turns out that the inome also pops up on a range of different arms and armour. Just look at all these arrowheads from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Now, these arrowheads are called yanone, and they're really interesting in themselves. They have these varying levels of intricacy in the way they're designed, and it turns out that there again, some of these may have been used for fighting, but other ones with more intricate designs would have been more proof of exceptional craftspersonship and metalwork. But interestingly, over time, the inome's significance kind of shifted and evolved. It could also be a symbol that could ward off misfortune. But honestly, if you have a big ass axe with you, you could probably ward off misfortune by just literally whacking away at your enemies. The earliest use of the heart as, you know, a literal beating heart is kind of gross when you think about it. May have been in medieval Europe. The use of the heart as this kind of romantic, commercialized St. Valentine's type of use was especially popularized in the 19th century. Look at all these kitschy vintage postcards with hearts on them. I absolutely love them. But they're also a lot, you know, like it's just like, hey, here's this giant heart just for you. Okay, whoa, back off. The heart became this shorthand in the 70s for love. Like I mentioned, nowadays we'd use it every single day, all the time, unless you're absolutely not on social media and you just don't send hearts or don't like or heart anybody's post ever, which, you know, live your life. Just, why not? But I love sending hearts. I send way too many. Heart. And its meaning can evolve and sometimes rejoin with other things in different ways. For example, hearts in video games are often a sign of life. So for example, if you're, you know, a character and you're playing in a game and you lose a life, you will lose a heart until you lose all your hearts and you have to start all over again. And this totally isn't what happens to me all the time. But I think that's also quite interesting in the context of hearts sometimes being used as symbols of vitality in early European arms and armour. A video game made in Japan, Castlevania, also has hearts, but not so much in the context of a heart symbolises a life you have left, as in amount of hearts is the amount of life you have left, but in the context of hearts being used to recharge ammunition. Another symbol that has become an emoji, and that this time really has a direct, powerful and pretty internationally recognized significance in Japanese culture, is the cherry blossom. I was kind of surprised when I was researching these weapons when I kept coming across this seemingly cherry blossom petal flower-shaped design on different arrowheads and different types of weaponry in general. Like on this arrowhead with the Inome design and cherry blossom design, which is dating back to between the 1600s and the 1800s and comes from the Higgins collection. And here it is again on more arrowheads from the Met Museum. And even looking back at our dear old pink axe, this may be projection and overinterpretation on my part, but it looks like this specific shape on its side looks like a 3-petal design or something that was maybe meant to emulate a petal. And you may be thinking, okay, so this is another trick, right? But as far as I can read up on it, no, that actually is a cherry blossom design. And if you're like me and you grew up with anime and manga, especially manga to be honest, I didn't start watching anime until I was a teenager, and then I really became a full-blown nerd. You will have seen the cherry blossom absolutely everywhere. Like every time there's a romantic scene, there's just like cherry blossoms everywhere. And so there's this temptation to see it when you're outside of a direct Japanese cultural context as something that is associated with romance, with something that is quite soft and cutesy, and there again, feminine. And you may think, where's the disconnect? Why is this appearing on historical arms and armour? Well, in Japan, the cherry blossom, or sakura, is a huge cultural staple, and the blooming of cherry blossoms is seen as a whole cultural event in itself. And again, you can see it emerging culturally in a range of different media. Specifically in terms of video games, I'm thinking about Animal Crossing. In Animal Crossing New Horizons, the newest edition of Animal Crossing, you have a moment during the year, at the beginning of spring, at the very beginning of April, where many of your trees are suddenly blooming with cherry blossoms. And that isn't a permanent occurrence though. That happens during probably 1 week or 2 weeks in the span of the game before they disappear again. So on a cultural level, it carries significance around its ephemeral nature. The fact that cherry blossoms bloom once a year for a very, very short period of time, and then they're gone again until the next year. So they came to be associated really strongly in Japanese culture with mortality, but also maybe on a higher level with the acceptance of your destiny. So this idea of the cherry blossom representing fleetingness and mortality, and maybe a sense of nostalgia of things passing by very, very quickly, and you need to capture that moment, meant that that significance could obviously be very wide-ranging in terms of different media that deals with destiny, with feelings, with things that will soon come to pass, but also would have carried significance in terms of having that type of symbolism on weaponry and arms and armour. What better place to engage with fleetingness and mortality than on a literal arrowhead, because nothing says accepting your destiny like taking an arrow to the knee. But in many senses, why can't we have both? Can the blossom be a symbol of beauty, femininity, softness, and also be a symbol of mortality and accepting your destiny, and associated with more kind of romantic shoujo manga type of media? Yes, absolutely. Perhaps the reason why we react so strongly to an axe that is pink and that has what looks like heart shapes and other weapons that look like they have flower, cherry blossom designs on them is because we carry fascination around colours and symbols that are traditionally perceived as soft and feminine, associated with weapons and objects that we perceive as more traditionally masculine. It reminds me of our weird compulsion to create these alternatives for girls in terms of toys and media that are pink themes and have hearts on them, and then we turn around and specifically forbid boys from playing with those toys because for some reason we think that pink and hearts and cute stuff is only for girls. I mean, come on. If you think your boys can't play with Barbies or can't play with the pink Power Ranger, can't paint their nails pink or wear a dress, I mean, I think that says a lot more about your own insecurities around your gender and how you want to project that fear and insecurity on others. So have fun dealing with that, but don't impose that on other people. But let's also remember that while we're talking about the way in which we assume these types of items as being relegated to women, or kind of interpreted in these masculine or feminine ways with very, very sharp contrasts, all this is assuming that warrior women are exceptional, which they maybe would have been in specific cultures, but definitely not in others, and definitely not in a Japanese context. Japan had warrior women within its history and culture that have fought as early as the 1st century AD. It would not have been an exceptional occurrence, but one that would have been ingrained in Japanese history and culture. The idea of a gendered weapon or gendering a weapon on its own just kind of gets thrown out the window when you explore the premise a little bit further. And sure, there may have been an instance in Japanese history of a warrior woman charging towards you with a weapon that was pink with an enome design. It probably would have been a naginata, a spear, rather than an axe. But if you were facing a warrior woman who was charging towards you with a pink weapon with heart shapes on it, the way in which this weapon held or challenged gender assumptions as we understand them in the 21st century would quite honestly be the least of your problems. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like it, or I guess heart it, but we don't have the heart option on YouTube, we have the thumbs up option. You can subscribe, you can hit the bell for notifications, be the next person to know about the next weird object I decide to talk about on this channel, and you can also comment. You can comment a heart, that would make my day, or you can simply suggest another topic that you would like me to cover in terms of awesome art and armor, awesome ladies, or a bit of both. All the stuff I talked about in this video in terms of further reading, images, are listed in the description down below. Follow me on social media where you can heart all my stuff for more sword content, for my podcast on women with swords throughout history, bustles and broadswords, and for my webcomic Girls' School of Knighthood, which, you've guessed it, talks a lot about women with swords as well, and also has quite a lot of hearts because it's kind of a fantasy romance comic. So there you go. Stay safe, sword lovers, or axe lovers, or pink heart stuff lovers, and see you in another video. Bye!